All right, guys, I'm gonna turn off one of the lights here and let me know that that's on.
You can leave
Both off?
Both off.
Okay, I'm gonna ask one favor. This is a big rule I have when lecturing, because it's a sign of respect. Cell phone under. I will take it as a personal offense if I see you playing on it. That's a weird thing. I tell my nieces all the time when we're all together. They say, "Can I play on your phone yet, Courtney?" And I say, "No, girlies, not when we're together. We're gonna spend quality time together." So that's just my one request, okay? All right, both lights are off. Okay, so diving in, again, I think we might have to go until tomorrow, which is totally okay. I think we're gonna have plenty of time. But we can start diving on in. Okay, so we're gonna explore a little further. So you've built your resume builder, you've learned a little bit about KSAE, but I wanna dive into what it takes to write an effective resume. We don't wanna just plug out a general run-of-the-mill cookie-cutter resume. That's not gonna do you any services when you're looking for a job. So we're gonna build a uniquely tailored resume that highlights that KSAE effectively and will really give you an advantage when you start job searching. It's also what it's gonna do is build a framework that you can build from for the rest of your career, okay? So again, like we discussed yesterday, a big mistake that people will make is they'll just pull up a random template and instantly start plugging things in. There's no strategy, there's no research, there's no thought behind the process. So when you're building your resume, you don't want to start writing things. There's a couple of things we have to explore first. So where to start? The very first thing is we have to get into the mindset of the employer, okay? A lot of times we think from our own perspective. What is our KSAE? What do we bring to the table? But I want you to flip your perspective a little bit. I want you to start thinking, okay, what does the employer want? And if these are the things they want, why do they want them? So ask the question, what do employers want and what do employers need, okay? So I'm gonna flick the light on real fast. I wanna talk this out a little bit more. Let's flesh out wants versus need. What's the difference between a want and a need?
I think a want is something they're willing to compromise on. They want it, but it's not necessarily something that has to be there.
Right.
Where a need is, you need it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, you guys, you fleshed that out beautifully. So let's let's kind of dig into that a little bit. If we're looking at job descriptions, has anyone looked at a job posting online lately? You start to see where this language starts to pop out in a job description, right? What word do you think would indicate that something is needed? Good, okay, so if you see the word required on a job description, you know that if I do not have this at a bare minimum, I will not get the job, I will not be qualified for the job. It's the bare minimum requirements. So guess what? If you fail to put the bare minimum requirements in your resume, do you think you're getting the job? You absolutely will not. I've seen so many qualified individuals not get the job because they didn't take the 10 seconds to update their resume or update their cover letter and make sure that they were indicating that they met at least the minimum requirements, okay? You can have the most visually beautiful resume, the most professionally written resume, but if it's not honing into these unique wants and needs, you're at a disadvantage right off the bat, okay? So very good. So you might see it as required. Think about the language you might see for want. Anybody want to take a jab at what language you might see for that? Oh, good, very good. Now they're not always going to use that. Sometimes you have to read between the lines, okay? But should you only focus on what they require? No, you also want to talk about what they prefer. The prefers are like the little cherries on top of the sundae. If you can show that you have both the minimum requirements plus the other goodies to sprinkle on top, they're gonna go, oh, yep, I want that, okay? You have to think employers spend a ton of time and money hiring. It is very resource expensive, okay? It takes me, when I'm hiring individuals, it takes me hours upon hours, if not weeks, to hire someone. It's a lot of my time, but on top of that, you should see how much it costs to post a job posting on Indeed. It's slightly disgusting. We have an admissions posting right now. For just to post the ad, it's a couple $100. For every applicant that applies to the job, it's $70. It's very expensive, okay? So for that reason, they're gonna wanna make sure they're getting the most out of their investment, because they don't wanna just bring on someone who's gonna be willy-nilly, look good on paper, maybe, question mark, and then down the road, they're in a pickle. They really wanna make sure that they're getting someone who meets their wants and needs. So if Brianna and Andrea show up to the interview, let's say Andrea only meets the minimum requirements. She's qualified for the job, right? Brianna doesn't show up to the interview, she's good to go, she's gonna get the job. But let's say Brianna shows up to the job, she has those minimum requirements, but she also has those preferences sprinkled on top. Who do you think I'm going with?
No.
Both are qualified candidates, but Brianna, by sprinkling on those preferences, made herself the outstanding candidate for the job, okay? So this is something to think about, and why it's so important that we familiarize ourselves with these questions first and do our research, because when we have our research done, we have those talking points, we have those little compasses that direct us towards things we need to put on our resume, in our cover letter, and speak about during our interview, okay? So you can think about it as a big puzzle piece. What do they want? What do they need? And how do you fit those wants and needs? How do you fit in? Where do those pieces connect for you? And just an important note, and this is going to be something we're looking for when Mr. Mont and I are reviewing your resumes. Everything on your resume should correlate to the job you're applying for. If you're applying for a job in obstetrics, I don't really care to hear about your experience, in your skill summary with senior care. If your whole skill summary is about senior care, but you're applying for a job in obstetrics, there isn't a lot of applicability, okay? So you want to keep it applicable. Okay, I'll turn the lights back off. All right. Oop, this isn't working. All right, so once we've gotten into the employer mindset, we then do our research. And there are a couple of different ways to research. One, look up job postings. And we're actually in week 2. You guys are going to be doing this, whether it's with myself or Mr. Mont. We're going to be finding job postings, and we're going to actually be printing them out and getting physical with them to analyze them for preferences, requirements, or those items in between the lines. We'll pick up on themes that come out in those job descriptions to help us be very informed. Not only does it teach us what skills and experiences they're looking for, or maybe education, it tells us what kind of cultural fit they're looking for. We can learn a lot from the job posting. And then we can also look at company websites. Another place you can research is go to Google Images, get inspiration, okay? I want you to write down this website. If the computer was not being so slow, I would physically pull it up for you, but it's being extremely slow today, and I'm so sorry. But it's www.onetonline.org. Remember how yesterday we talked about how HR departments, they spend a lot of time and money doing job analyses to get data from across their company, or there's some nationwide departments that actually do studies or job analyses on different occupations? This is actually a database, a government database with national data and statistics related to occupations. You can actually look up medical assisting, and it's a study done nationally of the different KSAE identified through national data. Now, it will show you wage medians, but you have to remember that What someone makes in Ohio is going to be completely different than what they're making in California and New York. So I would not rely on the salary tools too much because it's a national average, not a regional, local, state-based average, okay? So you'll see my last note here. Although I do encourage you guys to go online, get some inspiration, this is your resume, your creative work. So do not plagiarize it, okay? I cannot tell you how often we get candidates whose resumes look very similar. And then you do a little more research and you find out, wait, this is exactly the same. And then you do a Google image search and you find that resume on Google Images. So it is okay to get inspiration, but you are never allowed to copy. It should always be you. Okay? All right, take a wild guess. How long do you think it takes for an employer to judge your resume?
5 seconds. 3 seconds.
Ooh. Brianna, what you thinking?
Up to a minute.
Dang, you guys are good. So I've had people in the past like, oh, 24 hours. Yeah, that sounds about right. Oh, okay. How long does it take you to make a judgment about someone you don't even know? Just by looking at them or hearing them.
To look at them and look away.
It's pretty instantaneous, right? For an employer looking at your resume, it is almost instantaneous. You guys were very close. Statistically, it takes an employer 6 to 8 seconds to know if they will want to interview you. And I can attest to this as someone who employs people myself, and I'm constantly looking at resumes. I do not sit and read. Who has the time to sit and read every single resume? I glance at a resume, and in 6 to 8 seconds, I automatically know if I want to keep this resume on the stack of candidates or if I want to just trash it. My goal for you, and this is why this is important, and the things we're going to learn about are going to be important, is because my goal for you is that your resume stays on top of the stack and it doesn't end up in the trash. Okay? Can you guess where 99% of all resumes go? In the trash, right? 99, or recycling, hopefully. Okay, we want to stay on top of the pile. So some notes. Not only does your resume highlight your KSAE, the purpose of the resume is to also do that, to highlight your KSAE, but in a way that is very quick, scannable, and efficient. An employer has to be able to learn a lot about you as a professional very, very quickly. And if they're unable to do that, or if they're visually unable to scan through the information quickly, doesn't matter how qualified you are, doesn't matter how well you did in school, it doesn't matter how smart you are, how good you are, how kind you are, they will trash your resume, okay? And I've seen so many people who missed great opportunities because they did not take the time to think about these things, okay? Another way to think of this is your resume is your marketing flyer. Be honest, how many of you have bought something off of just quickly seeing something on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, something of that nature, okay? I just recently fell into the Halara dresses on TikTok with the pockets. They're amazing, by the way, a little pricey, but that was something, I saw that, and in 3 seconds I was like, I have to have that, okay? Well, you're selling yourself. This is branding. You guys are branding yourselves. Your resume is the marketing flyer. Is the purpose of the resume to get you the job? No, it's not. That's a misconception. People think the purpose of the resume is to get you a job. It's not. The purpose of the resume is to get you an interview. It's what you do in the interview that gets you the job. So make sure you have that delineation clear in your mind. Your resume doesn't get you the job, it gets you the interview. The interview is how you get the job. Guys, I'm a Pittsburgh girl. I talk a million miles an hour. If I am talking too fast, please let me know. This stuff gets me juiced, it gets me excited. And I also talk faster when I get excited. So please, you will not offend me if you just say, whoa, slow it down. Slow it down, please.
I haven't heard that in a long time.
What?
The fast talking Pittsburgh thing.
Yeah.
I lived in Pittsburgh for 3 years.
So you're used to it.
I'm
then.
used to it. I
We
like
do.
it.
We talk
Everybody-
very fast.
Everybody talks super slow here.
What you trying to say?
Yeah, what are you trying to
What
say?
are you? That I
And
love
I'm
you
the
all.
mean one.
You just call me slow.
That's what I'm
That's
saying.
my slow, Lisa.
I said you talk slow, and I love you.
In an interview, that's a good thing. You'll be nice and clear. Okay. Random picture.
I was really like, what?
Everybody does. Somebody in class is always like, what the heck? Okay, so we all know what this is, right? Okay. I'm going to give you a weird analogy, and I promise it connects to resume writing, okay? All right. Cold and flu season. I am sick as a dog. I am hacking up a lung. I know that I probably need something to help my symptoms. We can agree on that, right? Okay, so I know that I probably have to go to like Giant Eagle Pharmacy or like Walmart or something just to get something, right? That's the appropriate place to go, right? Okay, all right, we're on the right track. So, okay, here I am in Walmart. Apparently this is how I walk in Walmart. Going through the store and I come across this. Yep, put it in the cart. We're good to go. I'm gonna feel better, right? Why? You said I had to go to the pharmacy and get medicine. I did that. I did exactly what you told me to do, right?
Has nothing to do with what's wrong with
It's
you.
the wrong medicine.
Why? How do you know that?
Because it doesn't treat the symptoms you have
But how would I uncover that?
by taking it every
Okay, right? Can you learn a lot about this medicine very quickly if you didn't know what Tums was?
Yeah.
It's right
Okay, I can very quickly go to it. Heartburn, acid indigestion, sour stomach. I know this isn't going to treat my symptoms. However, if I did have these symptoms, I knew I'd be in a good place. How many of you have gone to the pharmacy before and you read the label on the front to determine if this was the appropriate medicine for you or not? Okay, it's a marketing flyer. You learned a lot about that medicine, and guess what? 6 to 8 seconds probably. How many of you bought something based off of what you read off the front of a medicine? Okay?
Yeah.
Later on, you determined if you really liked it or not, but you made your initial purchasing decision based off that label, right? So based off of this label, I can in 6 to 8 seconds determine if this is the right fit for my needs.
So your resume is your label.
Your resume is your label, your marketing flyer. You see how quickly. I love this analogy because it's a good way to think about it. You want to show that you are the Robitussin to their cough. I know that sounds so goofy,
I so love that. That is so fun.
right? So show that you're the Robitussin to their cough. You don't want to be the Tums to their cough. You're not the right fit, okay? Although Tums is an amazing medicine. That's what you need, but you want to be the Robitussin to their cough.
You definitely should put Robitussin up there. I like that though.
Good. I'm all about the weird analogies, so I'm glad you appreciate it. All right, here's another weird analogy. I sneeze. How many of you have heard someone ask, hey, pass me the box of Kleenex? Has anyone heard that? Pass me the Kleenexes. What are Kleenexes?
That's the brand name.
Tissues, but are all tissues Kleenexes?
No.
No, but Kleenex has branded themselves so well that a lot of people say, pass me the Kleenexes, okay? I hear people all the time with waffles. Ooh, can I have an Eggo? What do you mean an Eggo? That's a brand. But they think all waffles are Eggos. Or Coke. Coke's branded themselves so well that a lot of people in the Midwest, when they're asking for just a soda, they have to correct themselves because they automatically ask for a Coke, right? So your goal in this, remember this is your marketing flyer, you are going to brand yourself. So see, I get juiced about this. There's so many small things that if we don't take the time to think of, we're just plugging stuff into a resume template, we miss some of these really awesome strategies. So the very first thing we're going to build in is our branding. And that's why you picking a template with the understanding that you can always change the font, the color, how it's set up to personalize it is going to be good. So in your self-branding, not only should your resume be eye-catching and sell you, you're going to convert your contact info into your letterhead. which will then become your brand. When you think of East Ohio College, does that logo pop up in your head? What does it look like? Visualize it. Tell me what it looks like.
It's that half circle with the starburst.
Yeah, okay, the sunburst, okay, and then the white lettering and like the formal school lettering. Wait, Lisa has it on her shirt. There we go. Okay, you can automatically think that. Your letterhead or your contact information isn't just going to be your name and your contact information anymore. It's going to become your letterhead. How many of you have received a formal letter from the school? We had the logo and the contact info, right? You can make that association. What's going to happen is that letterhead you build on your resume, it's going to letterhead your resume, it's going to letterhead your cover letter, and it's going to letterhead your references. Couple of reasons we do this. Not only does it keep your brand consistent, it looks sharp as hell. It looks sharp as hell. It's very sleek and professional looking when all of your documents have that consistency and match. But here's another good reason, all right. I'm one for theatrics, so you guys are about to get a performance. Okay, let's say the employer is a big klutz like me, and this happens often. They're walking through the hallways. Oh no! They just dropped all their papers, okay? I told you, you guys are in for shows with me. Okay, so if I'm picking these up now, and Rihanna had submitted a resume, cover letter, references, and she only put her name on her resume, and then I have about 70 other applicants in this mix because I like to print resumes all out at once. Is it gonna be easy for me to match? So now there's a missed opportunity, whereas if she has her letterhead on all three, oh, boom, 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 I can put them together, okay? Oh man, I really regret doing this now. So, something to consider. So real fast, I want you to brainstorm. I want you to put down 2 words that are going to explain your brand. Do you want your brand to be sleek and traditional? Do you want your brand to be clean and modern? Do you want your brand to be traditional and spicy? I don't know. 2 words that you want it to be, because you're going to revisit these words when you're picking a resume template tonight. And then when we go to adjust and revise, what is your brand? I could see Andrea being a classic traditional. I could see Lisa being a sleek modern. I could see Rihanna being a jazzed modern. Okay?
Sleek and modern.
So, what are your 2 words? What are you thinking?
I don't have nothing.
We better think of something.
I know, but I don't know.
And that's okay. Give it some thought. If you can't think of it now, just think of what that might be, okay? You'll never have to repeat them, but at least an idea of the direction you want to take your brand.
Neat and accessible.
Oh,
Like clean and easy to read.
yes.
And all that information.
I like it.
Right there.
I like it. Very nice.
It's in this group chat later. Like, hey, guys, any ideas?
I love it.
Exactly what I'm doing.
All right, so
Organized and fun.
there we go. Beautiful. Perfect. Hey, I'm organized, I'm clean, I'm efficient, but I have a little bit of personality. I love it. Absolutely. Good. You're being consistent with your personal brand, because you can visually speak to that when you build your resume. Very good. All right, this should look familiar to your resume builder. Your name, your title, your address, phone, professional email, your title. You're expecting that you are going to have some credentials behind your name, so your title can be, CCMA, or it could be your name and then Certified Clinical Medical Assistant. We are going to build your resume as if you have earned your certification, because I have full faith you are all going to pass, okay? And I'm putting that good juju on you. Manifesting, that's the new word.
All the time, send you juju.
All right. The next section, so the contact information and the skills summary are the only two sections where every single person will have them in the same place. And we do this for a very specific reason, and I'll explain why. After that, depending on the professional experience you have, the schooling you have, volunteer experience, whatever else, the rest of your resume may format in a different way, okay? So just keep note of that. Obviously, for the sake of a lecture, we have to go in a specific order, but that may not be the order your resume's in after skills summary, okay? But the first official section you guys will have on your resume in the same place is a skills summary. You don't want to list it as skills because then an employer will think it's all encompassing. You want to say skills summary because it's a highlight of the skills you bring to the table. For the sake of our resume, we're specifically going to focus on your hard professional skills, just an overview of those marketable skills, okay? Here's my recommendation. Separate your skills summary into columns. If you do a big bulleted list, let's get a visual here. I'm going to turn on the light. Let's look at why we do this, okay? So if I have a resume, okay, here's my letterhead. If I just do a big bulleted list of 8 to 12 skills, they're gonna take up the left side of the page, they're gonna take up a whole portion of the page vertically, and then you're gonna have a bunch of blank space on the right-hand side. Whereas if you split that into two, oh gosh, and you just do 2 columns, you see how that more effectively utilizes your space? And also by doing columns, it's a visual thing. It separates information in a very clear, concise way. If you keep them short, sweet, to the point, the reason we put them at the top, remember, if the employer is going to learn about you in 6 to 8 seconds, that clear, concise skills summary at the top is going to let them know a lot about you very quickly, especially if you're including your title. In 6 to 8 seconds, I can learn Andrea Harnett, Certified Clinical Medical Assistant, here's the skill she has. If that's all I get to on her resume, I've still learned a lot of information about her. So that's why I always recommend. I do not recommend putting an objective on your resume. Anyone want to take a jab why? No right or wrong answers, we're just kind of thinking it out.
Everybody kind of has that same objective. Your objective is to get a job.
The objective is to get a job, let's be honest. Exactly, employers know that. To me, all an objective is a space waster. And it's extra wording that I don't care about, because think about it, if an objective's up at the top of your page, if they're looking at that 6 to 8 seconds, they're maybe getting through your objective and going, no interest.
Now, I have a question. On my resume, the way I have my objective worded, I kind of list the region that I would like to work in. I say I am seeking part-time or full-time employment. I say the type of employment I'd like, part-time or full-time, to ensure that I'm open to either one. And then I say I'm seeking part-time or full-time employment in Trumbull, Mahoning, or Mercer County. Is that acceptable, or would that be more something to talk about during the interview?
In the intermediary, actually. That's the lovely thing and why we always like to have a resume and a cover letter, because then the cover letter can elaborate on the resume. So keep the resume succinct and then elaborate that in your cover letter. Since they're being submitted at the same time, if they get juiced about your resume to the point that then, okay, let me read the cover letter now, they'll get that information there.
Because I always want to make sure I put that out there, that I'm open to multiple areas. Some places have offices in different locations.
Yeah.
So I just always want to make sure I put that out there, and that I'm willing to do part-time or full-time.
I think that's great to share, because that enhances your opportunities at that point. So, good question. Look at you. Great questions. Okay. So yeah, that's a skill summary. So making sure it's easily scannable. Any other questions? I'm not moving too fast, am I? Okay. Let's move on. All right, so education. For some people with a little professional experience, or working experience, education may be higher up on your resume. Those with significant professional experience, it may be lower. It just depends, and we'll determine. That's why we do the resume builders when we go to build tomorrow, if we have time. We can look at your resume builder first, and I'll work with each of you individually to make a determination on how you should lay your resume out, given your unique KSAE. Okay? Woo! I'm a klutz.
Okay.
All right, so when we go to do our education section, any sort of experience, we're going to learn about reverse chronological order, most recent to least recent. We'll get to that. Oh, so you can see I made this presentation back in 2017. That's why you're still going to see Ohio Valley College Technology. So there's going to be a couple of lines. Line 1, it's going to be the school name in bold, city and state in the middle, no bold. And then date range on the far right-hand side, making sure perfectly aligned. The month and the year. Second line, in italics, your degree and major with the date and participated on the far right-hand side. Can you see that we're using bold, no bold, italics? Why do you think we're using the bold, no bold, italics?
Highlight the school.
Okay. So yeah, using bold or italics in specific places not only can help highlight pertinent information, what it also does is it helps the reader visually separate information. So that's why we're going to utilize that. So if we consistently use italics in a certain place, it keeps things consistent. Same thing with bold. I always like to keep company names bold. I always like to keep position titles or degrees in italics. I always like to line the company and job information or school and degree information up on the far left-hand side, and I always like to have the dates on the far right-hand side perfectly aligned. It keeps things consistent. It makes it very easy to read, okay? You may include other information under education unless it's in a different section. You may include things like certifications. I actually always recommend that you do a certification section separately. I think that's an important section to separate out. But if you don't want to do that, you could possibly do it under schooling. You sometimes can put school volunteer experience if you have it, maybe like student government, if you were on student government. If you've been on the president's or dean's list, I always recommend putting it under your education. It shows a standard of excellence. Now, if you haven't been on president's or dean's list, it's okay. That doesn't mean you're not a qualified employee, but if you are, it's good to highlight. You may also choose, if you have a GPA of a 3.5 or higher, cumulative, you may wish to include that as well. Am I good to move on? You guys still take notes? Okay. Okay, remember, we want to always use reverse chronological order. Anytime we're talking about schooling, professional experience, work experience, volunteer experience. Does anyone remember what reverse chronological order stands for?
Recent first, and then oldest last.
You've got it, most recent to least recent. This is a big area whenever I grade resumes where I see students lose points because they don't keep things most recent to least recent. The only exception to this rule is, let's say you're currently in a job that you're counting as professional experience, but you're also doing your externship. You will always keep your externship on top, okay? That's like the only fluke exception. Okay. So for your professional experience section, if we're thinking of your resume as like a burger, your professional experience section will be like the meat patty of your burger. Okay, everything else is just the buns, the fillings, and everything else. This is really the substance of the resume. Okay, and remember how on your resume builder I had you building descriptions? This is where this starts to connect. So the professional experience for consistency purposes on the left-hand side, line 1, company name in bold, city and state in the middle, the date range on the far right-hand side lined up, just month and year. You never have to do specific days. That's too much information. Remember, we're trying to take out unnecessary stuff, okay? Line 2 in italics, not in bold. I don't know why that's in bold. In italics on line 2, the position title right under company name, lined up on the left-hand side. If applicable, you may choose to show how many hours you have completed. I always recommend writing your resume as if you have finished, you have graduated, all that fun stuff. So you can put 160 hours. Employers like quantitative information if you can provide it. So let's say at your externship site you serviced over 250 patients during your time there. That might be quantifiable information you want to include. Anytime you can add numbers in there, I always say do it. Like if I were talking about my job as campus president, I would always in some way, shape, or form mention that I led a team of over 50 employees because I think that's substantial quantifiable information to share. Okay. Under each of these jobs is where you're going to write a detailed description. Here's my rules though. You will never start a sentence with I or me. I do not recommend writing in bullet points. You don't want it to become like a list. I think it should be a little more narrative. Each of your sentences though will start with a past tense verb. Okay? This should include your externship or preceptorship. Okay? And then your past tense verbs, guys, should be very good, strong words, okay? So let's map this out. Let's do an example. Would I say I did EKGs? No, what's a better verb?
Provided.
Huh?
Completed, provided.
There you go. Completed. Performed. Administered. Okay. Okay. I always like you to highlight things you actively did. If you assisted, you can highlight that, but if you actually did it, I want to say that. Okay? So that sounds better. So completed EKGs, performed EKGs, administered EKGs. That sounds much better. So I'm going to really force you as you start to build your resumes and we review them and we update them. I'm going to force your hand. I want to see you using those strong verbs. There's actually going to be an expectation when Mr. Mont and I grade your resumes that you do have those high-level verbs. Okay? Has anyone ever heard of thesaurus.com?
No.
If you are not familiar, become familiar. So, thesaurus.com. It helps you find synonyms. So if you need a synonym for the word did, it'll give you a lovely list of stronger words. Here is another thing. I always say past tense. You want to make sure you keep things in the appropriate tense. I see so often that students will write a description, they'll be like, performs EKGs, collected vitals, does patient education. You see how it's a mix of tenses on the verbs? If you mix your tenses, it doesn't seem grammatically correct and it doesn't sound right, and employers are going to perceive you in a specific way. So make sure you go through and make sure that your tenses are consistent. And we will check, when we're reviewing your resumes, we will check for tense consistency.
So in our work experience, like, if we're still working there, are we still using
You'll
past
keep it
tense?
present, you'll do present tense.
Present tense,
So
okay.
if you're still there, it will be present tense,
Okay.
yes. Good question. So yeah, make sure your tenses are correct because that is something you will be graded on. And an employer will pick up on it. And the word performed, it's a commonly used verb in descriptions. Make sure you're using P-E-R-F. I cannot tell you how many times I see people put P-R-E, performed. It's performed, okay? All right. Here is a good example of actually a student wrote this. This is a student written description. Greeted and roomed patients, collected accurate vitals, including blood pressures, pulse and respirations, and temperatures. Recorded chief complaints into the electronic medical record. Administered injections and eye and ear irrigations and installations. Set up trays in examination rooms. Performed suture removal, rapid strep, pregnancy glucose and drug tests. Implemented effective infection control procedures to sterilize equipment and clean rooms, ensured patient safety, comfort, and confidentiality. It's a phenomenal description. And guess what your description should always do? Can you technically pluck out some of your hard skills from here? Anything you do in your job search, you should always show, not tell. Does that kind of make sense? And if it's not, I'm going to explain what show, not tell means. I could come up to you and say, yeah, I have experience as a rocket scientist with NASA. You might believe me if I'm convincing enough. But if you're a true skeptic, are you really going to believe me unless I show you? You're going to want the evidence, right? You're going to want to see the evidence. Same thing with employers. You can tell them things all day long, and they see it all the time where people lie on their resume. So you can tell them things all day long. You start to support what you say are your skills by evidencing them not only in your descriptions, but then revisiting them during your cover letter, revisiting them in your interview. You can see how you can create that thread of consistency throughout, okay? But then the strong verbs. And you can also see that this wasn't just a list of, okay, I checked in for the day. I worked from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. and this is every little thing that I did in the job. That becomes very boring. They don't want to read that. It really highlights those primary skills. Okay. We already talked about make sure to include your externship in that section. All right, additional work experience. If you have a lot of work experience or past employment that's irrelevant to the position, you're not going to have to give big, beefy descriptions unless they are directly applicable or directly transferable, okay? So for past work experience, you can list it. You don't need to go back more than 10 years unless it's applicable via transferable skills. So this one, it just takes lines 1 and 2 of the professional. So company name in bold, far left-hand side, city and state, no bold in the middle. Far right-hand side, lined up with all the other date ranges perfectly, is your date range, month and year. The second line in italics, lined up on the left with company, is the position title. And then if you had any applicable certifications that you think are worth mentioning, and I can help you explore that, you have the capacity to put certifications.
So that'd be like things like your CPR, your BLS.
Yeah. So like, if I was going into medical assisting, and back in the day I was a lifeguard for the YMCA, and I had my CPR, first aid, oxygen, AED, I probably want to mention all of those things to show that training. Okay? Now, you may, in unique circumstances, have additional sections. Let's say you have an exhaustive list of certifications. We may do a certification section. I think you guys should all do a certification section to really highlight that CCNA, CPR, first aid. We'll explore that though. Let's say you have significant but applicable volunteer experience. You may explore that as a section. Let's say you have military service. That may be a section you want to add. Maybe you have significant awards and honors. I have that as my own separate section on my resume to highlight those things. Leadership experience. So you can get creative. So often we see education, work experience, skills. And those are the common ones, but you can get a little adventurous with your resume. Don't want to get too crazy, but you can get adventurous. Oop, I hope I didn't click too far. Oh boy, this is really being slow. Okay, we already discussed this. Can you guess where 99% land? So, what we're going to look at now, we're going to kind of flip our perspective on its head. We're going to look at resumes that will end up in the trash, or if you want to get your resume in the trash, how you can get your resume in the trash. Obviously, we don't want to do these things, but these things will automatically get it sent to the trash, okay? If you get too personal, automatic trash can resume for the sake of not wanting to be discriminatory, because you'll automatically be discriminatory in an interview if you have too much information. If I know your height, weight, horoscope, all the names of your children, their ages, their school, that's really getting too, I don't even want to deal with it. I'm just going to wipe my hands clean of it, okay? If there are spelling or grammar issues, that is the number one reason your resume will get trashed. So let's visit this for a second. I have to share a story with you guys. A few years ago, you know how you do those instructor surveys sometimes in class? Mm-hmm. I had a student write on mine, and I took it as the biggest compliment. They meant it in a nasty way. I took it as a huge compliment. They said, Mrs. Martin needs to understand that we are medical assistants, not English majors. I took it as a huge compliment. I care about you guys a lot. And like I said yesterday, how I demonstrate that I care about you a lot is I don't sweep things under the rug, because to me that is the number one way to show I don't care. I care about you, I care about your success, so heck yes, you best believe that if you have grammatical or spelling errors, I'm going to pick out every single one, and it's going to seem like I'm being super nitpicky. I'm a busy woman, I don't have the time to do that, but I'm going to make the time to do it because I care about you, okay? Spelling and grammatical issues, let's get into the mind of the employer. Remember, we want to have that perspective. If you're the employer and you get a resume that has a ton of spelling and grammatical issues on it, what are you thinking? I'm thinking two things. What are you thinking?
Hair.
Huh?
No, hair. To make it look professional.
That is the number one thing I'm thinking. As an employer, if I see spelling and grammatical issues, I think, wow, they really do not care. If this is what they're submitting as their professional resume, they don't care.
Most of the time, the computer will fix it for you.
Mm-hmm. There's a lack of time given, there's a lack of attention, there's a lack of detail, okay? But then I start to pry that apart. I go beyond the surface. Not only do they not care, I start to have concerns. Oh, wow, this Andrea really looks good on paper, but this is concerning me that she lacks attention to detail. This is a problem. I can't have someone who lacks attention to detail, because if she misses something in her documentation, or she doesn't put something into the EHR the right way because she lacks detail or she doesn't care, this could be a huge mistake. There was an office down in East Liverpool a few years ago, not by one of our students, thank God. They hired someone to fix the problem from our school. Someone who was not paying attention or being careless, entering stuff into the HR. Cost that office like $15,000 because of simple mistakes. So what seems like, oh, it's just a small spelling error. Oh, no. It's giving an impression of something much bigger. Red flags will go up, okay? If you're only learning about someone based off of what you see on a piece of paper, lots of things can lead to an impression, and spelling and grammar will do that. But also, not just the caring aspect. Employers, are they in it to do you favors? It sounds heartless, but guess what? An employer's probably going to think, oh, does this person maybe not have the smarts? Okay? I know that sounds horrible and vicious, but employers are not in it to do you guys favors. They're in it to weed people out and identify the best candidate, okay? All right, another one is too much info or a word overload. If you have too much info, nobody has the time or the interest of reading through an exhaustive storybook of a resume, okay? So you wanna make sure it's streamlined. My rule of thumb, your resume should be 1 page, short, sweet, to the point. I'm considered at a more experienced level in my career. Technically, I, at my point in my career, could have a 2-page resume. I refuse to. I still keep it at a 1-pager because I like it being succinct, okay? You guys, even if you have been working your whole life as a medical assistant, you were just now entering the field. So you are at this point going to be considered greenhorn. You're going to be considered entry level. So for that reason, it's not appropriate for someone at entry level to have a multi-page resume. Short, sweet, to the point, 1 page. Here's my rule to help you guys maintain that. Anything beyond 1 page of your resume will not be reviewed for grading. So it has to be in 1 page. Now if you're sitting there going, oh crap, I have a 3-page, 4-page, 5-page resume. What am I gonna do? I have helped someone who had an 11-page resume get it down to 1. Don't stress. Someone had an 11-page resume.
I've been working professionally for like 12 years before I came to school. I don't know how I can condense it to 1 page. I have a 2-pager.
Because we're gonna think about the job we're applying for and condense because we're marketing for that job. So, and that's what happens is so often people think, okay, my resume has to be this exhaustive list of everything I've done. That's a curricular vitae. We're building a resume. We're building our marketing flyer specific to the industry, specific to the job. I promise you, we will be able to condense. We will find a way. If I can do an 11-pager, I can help you. If you have a 3-pager, you said, easy peasy, no problem. I have full confidence we'll be able to do it.
Smart. I didn't know that you had to do
We got it. I think we'll get it.
For years, so I have descriptions of my last 5 years worth of work experience.
We'll get it, I promise you. I have no doubt, okay? This one at the bottom left you would think is a very obvious one, but I cannot tell you how often this pops up as an issue, where you show off hobbies or oddities. Right now, like you see things on social media, people, they want to stand out, so they do these weird, bold moves on their resume, or like weird, crazy things. Although it does in the weird fluke situation work for people, more often than not, it does not translate how people want it to, okay? I've seen people, these are actual real examples, where they've put on their resume things like, I like collecting Barbies. Or I have a stamp collection that I've been keeping for 15 years. Or I can play a tuba with my feet. Maybe if you're shooting the breeze with the employer in an interview, that might be like a weird thing you land on. I've spoken about Harry Potter with candidates before. I've spoken about hiking, dogs, pizza. And that's okay if you're shooting the breeze in an interview, but on a resume, it's not the appropriate place. Here's one. This is a big one that people don't recognize often. Negativity. Am I reaching it? I'm short. Negativity, okay? We know the obvious negativity, like, oh yeah, that person's an awful biatch, right? That is a very obvious version of negativity. But a lot of people are negative on their resumes without realizing it. And it's the connotation behind the word. Ready? Here's a perfect example of connotation. Lisa has basic understanding of medical assisting. Andrea has strong understanding of medical assisting. I was attesting to both of them having an understanding of medical assisting, right? I might have intended that as a positive complimentary thing. However, what was the connotation from one to the other? Were they both equal in connotation?
Basic and strong. Basic and strong.
Basic and strong, which one do you want?
Strong.
Right. What connotation does basic have?
That you can
Low, subpar, right? That's the connotation. Even if that wasn't my intention, an employer might perceive it as such. So when you're talking about yourself, don't just say you have basic understanding. I see students all the time say they have basic understanding of something. No, don't do that. Okay? Or here's another one. I see students who want to explain how, like, as a manager of a job, they were able to deal with, like, nasty customers, but the way they present it in their resume seems like they're crap talking coworkers, unruly employees, customers. And when you're talking about other people in a negative way like that, what's the impression the employer's going to get?
very negative.
Ooh, are we going to have a problem on our hands here? Yeah, so be very careful. Another thing is lying or bending the truth. If you only did 3 successful sticks in your phlebotomy class, please do not go on your resume saying that you have 90 successful sticks. Okay? Just be honest, okay? Don't get too creative. Too often, students will want to make it so bright and colorful and cute that they'll get these personalized templates that they spend $20 on it. It's like floral borders and hot pink. We don't want to get too crazy. We want to keep it sleek, simple. You can add a little bit of jazz into it. There might be some opportunity for some colors, but you don't want to get too crazy. Same thing with your fonts, okay? And then buzzwords. We want to avoid those cliche buzzwords we hear often. How many of you have heard, oh, I'm a go-getter. I think outside of the box. I love helping others. Those are all common cliche things. Everybody's using those. So make sure you're not using those phrases. Hate to move on without hurting here. All right, we have about 5 minutes. I think we'll finish up this slide and we'll pick up where we left off tomorrow. So some important tips specific to formatting. You want to make sure you are consistent. Make sure you're bolding in the right places, italicizing in the right places, lining things up. The biggest thing that drives me nuts when looking at resumes is when things are disjointed or choppy, or things aren't lined up properly, just because it's a visual distraction. The best way an employer is going to effectively get through your resume is if it's not a visual distraction. You want it to be visually pleasing, but there's a difference between being visually pleasing and visually distracting. Okay? Margins should only be between a 0.5 and a 1 inch spacing maximum and minimum. No less, no more, because then it's either overcrowding the page or it's too much blank space. You do want to fill the entire page, and you want to do so without overcrowding the page. Now your font size, your standard font size, like for your description, should be a 10.5 minimum. That's the smallest font you should use unless you're sharing your contact information, because some employers might have a hard time seeing anything smaller. The biggest you're ever really going to get is maybe like a size 20, 22 for your letterhead. But really, if you're in like the 10.5 to 12 point font size, you'll be in a good place. Avoid crazy colors, yellows, lime greens, baby blues. They're pretty, but they're very hard to see, especially if someone's colorblind or they're harder of seeing. That could become a problem. All right, and then we want to justify items on the page appropriately. Do you know what justify means? They're the little lines on Word document where you can left a line, center a line, right a line, or do like the even alignment. That's actually called justified. Your descriptions should always be justified on the page. Okay? That'll keep things consistent. I should be able to go down your page with a ruler and everything line up perfectly on the left, everything line up perfectly on the right, and your descriptions line up perfectly in their locations. Careful about your punctuation. I love this little visual here. You can see why commas can be so important, especially where they're located. Let's eat grandma versus let's eat grandma. They have two very different meanings. Okay. Some recommended fonts. You don't want to get too crazy with your fonts. These are the top 10 recommended by a study done on monster.com. Anything that's clear, easy to read, are always the best. And that's an example. So this could be very simple. So there is one glaring problem. So overall, this was a very well done resume. But I'm testing you guys. What is one glaring problem you can notice on this resume?
I rarely see it.
I know. But that's okay. You don't actually need to be able to see the details of it to identify the glaring problem.
On earning certification.
That's okay. It keeps it consistent because if you look how consistent. You can visually separate important information out because of that bold caps in blue. The position titles are in italics. I think that is very well done. You can see the sections, how they're separated, and that makes it very easy for your eyeballs to separate that information. Look how beautifully everything's lined up on the left-hand side. I could take a ruler and everything is perfectly aligned. I use the justified button for my description, so look how nice and crisp they are. Everything on the right-hand side, perfectly aligned, crisp, clean. Look at those columns, they're so easy to read through.
Is it that the experience description is more of a paragraph instead of like broken up? It's too wordy?
So I like it in paragraph form. It doesn't need to be bullets, but that's a freaking massive description. Although it's a good one, an employer's probably not going to want to read that entire description. I would say cut this by a sentence or two. So this is more of an appropriate description size. So that's my only complaint about this resume is that description is just a little bit too
Just do
extreme.
it basic in like 2 to 3 sentences.
Sometimes it might be more, depending. You just don't want it to be extremely massive like that. So you guys are welcome. We're going to cut it off here. If you want to take a picture of this for some inspo, you certainly can. But we will pick up on this tomorrow, and then we're really going to dive into looking at your resume builder to determine a layout.
And you said tomorrow you'll get us those papers of everything we have to have, right?
Yep.
Like those pictures.
You got it. And then tomorrow will be Mr. Mont's very first day. So we'll have to welcome